Hello again. Despite all that has been happening in Britain in the last year or so, and of course the rest of the world, I'm still not convinced that we need to posit a conspiracy to explain events or to shed light on why the British government is acting in the way which it is. Everything which I know of governments seems to me to be quite adequate to account for everything which I have observed. The thumbnail to this video shows troops and heavily armed paramilitary police on the streets of London in 2017. Why did the then Prime Minister Theresa May decide to make the capital look like Belfast at the height of the Troubles? It was terrorism, of course. Last year, soldiers were on the streets of London once more to deal with another terrible emergency. This time it was a contagious disease. Some of you might have noticed, by the way, that there has been no mention at all of terrorism in Britain in the last year or so. Until the advent of COVID-19, we were being menaced with the threat of terrorism all the time. It's odd because Afghanistan is about to fall once more to the Taliban. There's various other alarming developments, and we are not being told that the threat level from terrorism is now critical or super severe or anything. Nobody seems to be worried anymore about that supposed danger. I say supposed because, of course, terrorism has never really been any kind of threat to people in this country. It's all a lot of nonsense. In the last 20 years, 93 people have been killed in Britain by terrorists. That works out at just under 5 a year. Over the same period, 98 people have been killed by cows in Britain. People go for a walk in the countryside and a cow comes close to them, suddenly falls over and crushes them to death. That happens if you keep your eyes on the newspaper. It's not at all an uncommon occurrence. Certainly more frequent than being blown up by a terrorist. Just over 100 people in the last 20 years have been killed by bees and wasps, and 60 have been struck by lightning and killed. These things actually pale into insignificance when you compare them with the 29 people every year who drown in the bath and the 55 each year who die falling from ladders. So actually ladders are about 10 times more of a hazard to people than Islamist terrorists. Don't even mention the 6,000 people who have died falling off their beds over the last 20 years. Seriously, I'm not joking now. 300 people a year on average die from falling off their beds. So the threat of beds is about, oh gosh, I could barely work it out, about 60 times greater than terrorism for people in this country. So it is that because of those 5 deaths a year from terrorism, we've seen the police armed with automatic rifles, ferocious laws enacted, troops patrolling London, and many other undesirable things. The government loves terrorism because, trifling though the actual danger is in reality, it gives them an excuse to boss us about under the pretext of protecting us. Remember when identity cards were about to be brought in to deal with the threat of terrorism? Of course, now there's a new danger with which we can be menaced. The threat of terrorism is no longer needed, which is why you've not heard anything about it lately. It's been discarded for the time being. Only one source of mortal anxiety is necessary to frighten people into submission. The things with which I've seen people put up over the last year are quite extraordinary, and none of it could have been achieved without the fear of death. I hope people do not think that I'm being cynical, for I truly don't mean to be so. But let's ask ourselves, just out of interest, why do people go into politics in the first place? Of course, there are some who have honest motives and a genuine desire to help others, but this is such a tiny minority that it's really statistically insignificant. We can disregard those people for now. There are three chief reasons why people get involved in politics, whether on a local or a national level. The first of these is money. Even on ordinary town councils, there's money to be made. In many areas, the local planning departments have a corrupt relationship with builders and developments, and much of the real business is done not at the town hall, but rather on the golf course. For MPs, of course, the opportunity to make extra money on top of their big salaries is always there. The second motive for wanting to be in politics is being famous, or even just being well known locally in your town. An awful lot of people like to see their picture in the papers, and they love appearing in public and being recognised. The need to feel important is a powerful one, and even if you're just opening a library or giving prizes at the school sports day, for many councillors and MPs, this is what it's all about. You matter and people listen to what you have to say. Then we come to perhaps the biggest motive of all for getting mixed up in politics, which is the desire to boss other folk around. The enjoyment of telling people what to do and then watching them do it is not one I've ever felt, but an awful lot of people get off on it. The police often do. Local councils love to make rules. And of course, being in the government means that you can order around everybody in the country. To get people to accept your orders, though, it's best if you can make it look as though you're bossing them about for their own good, saving them from some terrible danger, in other words. Frightened people are likely to be the most obedient. This is why I don't think we need any conspiracy to explain the actions of governments in recent years, particularly the last year or so, of course. They're simply doing what governments like doing best, telling us what to do and when to do it. This is why both Theresa May and Boris Johnson ordered the army into action. What a great feeling that must be. Just imagine being able to say to yourself, it's time for me to call out the military. You'd feel like the Duke of Wellington or Oliver Cromwell. What power! Just imagine being able to give such orders and nobody can contradict you. This then is why you need a menace which you can claim to be combating on behalf of the ordinary men and women in the street. I've quoted Mencken before, and I make no apologies for doing so again, because it provides the key to almost everything we've seen in the last year in Britain. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary. If you wish to understand what's going on right now, then this one sentence tells you all you need to know. What we are currently witnessing, and about which so many people are very uneasy, is a political rather than an epidemiological phenomenon.